Hello my sweets, it's Keisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I've joined some of my YouTube friends in collaboration to bring you different ideas on a spring, Easter tablescape, or in my case, centerpiece. So when you're done watching my video, check out the link to the playlist in the description box below to see what my talented friends created. Alright, let's get started. To begin, I traced my bunny ornament onto a book page. I did two so I could cover both sides. Next, I cut both of them out. And then I adhered the cutouts to the bunny using Mod Podge. Here I'm showing you I have the bunny covered on both sides. To make sure the paper isn't going to come off, I brushed on a thin layer of Mod Podge. And to speed up the process, I used my heat gun to dry the first side. I brushed Mod Podge on the other side and set it aside to dry. Next, I cut out a square of cardboard big enough to cover the bottom of this Dollar Tree napkin ring. I applied hot glue to the bottom of the ring and attached it to the cardboard. Then used my scissors to cut the excess cardboard away from the napkin ring. Now taking 9 of the Dollar Tree carrots, I glued them around the perimeter of the ring, making sure they are flush to the bottom. Once complete, I placed a small hair tie around the top to stabilize the carrots, then placed small dabs of glue on the inside where the carrots touched each other. Now taking Dollar Tree floral moss, I fill the gaps along the bottom of the carrots where any silver is showing. Be careful during this process as you can easily get burned. Next, I filled in any areas where cardboard may be seen. Now I cut down a piece of floral foam to fit down into the carrot pot and glue it into place. To hide the floral foam, I glued some Spanish moss around the inside of the pot. You want to be careful here not to get burned by any hot glue. Once complete, I removed the hair tie and wrapped some twine around the carrots and tied a simple bow. Now that the bunny is dry, I used the rougher side of my sanding block to shape up the edges. Next, I'm going to paint the craft stick using Waverly chalk paint in Hazelnut and in Mineral. I also go ahead and dry brush the bunny on both sides using those colors. The craft stick I'm using is a little too long, so I cut it down to 4 inches. Then I glued the stick to the bottom of the bunny. I forgot to do this step earlier, but I tie a simple twine bow to attach to the other side of the pot. This way, if your carrot pot is sitting in the middle of your table, it will be pretty from both sides. Now to add the bunny into the carrot pot. Place some hot glue on the bottom of the craft stick and poke it down into the floral foam. Pay attention to where your bows are for proper placement. This next step is optional, but I wanted to add some flowers and greenery. This will also help camouflage the stick. I have a small dining table, so 2 of these are great for a centerpiece. If you have a larger table, you can make more and use them as place card holders by writing your guest's name on one side of the bunny. The final step is to tie a simple twine bow around the bunny's neck. The next DIY was inspired by a piece of decor that I made early last year. Start by cutting the inner rings out of both 8-inch wreath forms. Then attach them together with floral wire from Dollar Tree. You want to be careful when wrapping the wire. A piece poked me and I had to cut this segment short. Now taking twine, wrap the entire wreath form. The twine I'm using is from Walmart. It's a little thicker than the one from Dollar Tree. I was going to use the Dollar Tree twine, but I didn't think I had enough, so I'm using what I had more of. Secure the end of the twine with a little hot glue on one of the crossbars. When the end is secure, you're going to wrap and wrap and wrap some more, and then secure every now and then with a little dab of hot glue. When I got to the end, I secured the tail on the inner side of the wreath. To make the base, I'm using this oval plaque and 2 tumbling tower blocks. I'm marking where I need to glue the blocks for support to keep the wreath standing upright. Next, I channeled my inner Picasso. Using these 3 colors, I painted the base until I was satisfied with the way it looked. This was my first time using the Scallion paint. When I opened the jar, my heart sang. It brought back so many fond memories of Easter growing up. When I was satisfied, I set it aside to dry. Next, I took one of 3 plastic eggs and torn strips of book pages to decoupage onto the egg. I first secured the egg onto a skewer with a small amount of hot glue and applied the strips of book pages using Mod Podge. Once it was fully covered, I set it aside to dry. The second egg I decided to paint with Waverly chalk paint in Hazelnut and dry brush with Cashew chalk paint. I went back and forth in between those 2 colors until I was happy with the way it looked. The last egg, I did a light coat of Waverly chalk paint in Cashew, allowing the sprinkles to still be visible. I don't have a clip for it, but I did dry brush the book covered egg with the Cashew chalk paint. Then I sanded all of the eggs to soften the colors. And I made sure to dust them off when I was done. This portion is optional, but I wanted to dress my eggs up a bit, so I used a combination of Dollar Tree lace and twine with lace and buttons from my stash. Next, I brought back out the wreath and the base and attached them together with hot glue. Taking an empty ribbon spool, I'm going to use it to make a nest. I prepare it by removing one side, then trimming the other. To close the hole in the bottom, I cut a circle out of the first piece I removed and glued it in place. To make the nest, I gathered together Spanish moss and a little Excelsior. I worked the two together to make them look as natural as possible. Then I glue it around the outside of the ribbon spool and also folding some over onto the inside. Once again, you want to be careful during this step as you can easily get burned. I continue working the Spanish moss and Excelsior until it looks like a nest and no cardboard is visible. Then as a finishing touch, I added some pieces of floral moss and used a skewer to poke it into place. Going back to the wreath and base, I added some floral foam around the tumbling tower pieces. And then I came in with floral moss to hide the foam. I mainly placed it along the area where the foam met the base. This next part is a little hard for me to explain, but basically I'm making the crocus flowers into single flower stems. I'm also making them short enough to poke into the floral foam at the base. And here I am adding the flowers to the base. Now I'm taking tulips I purchased at Walmart to add up the sides. I thought I could just stick them in between the twine, but upon standing it up, I realized I had to secure them a little better. So this was not my original plan. The first idea I envisioned didn't work out for me when I tried to bring it to reality. Not one to be beat, I reworked my plan and I love this one even better. After getting the tulips put on, I decided to add some Dollar Tree lavender to break up the yellow and to match the bunnies in the carrot pots. Now using a generous amount of hot glue, I attached the nest. And it's almost done. This is a smaller centerpiece to fit my size dining table, but you can make more for a larger table or use larger wreath forms. I also opted not to make the eggs permanent by gluing leftover flower stems into the holes. That way I can change them out later for a bunny, a bird, or even flowers. Next I'll be making a simple table runner that can be used any time of the year. What you'll need is a fabric of your choice. I'm using drop cloth leftover from a previous project. This cotton twine here from Dollar Tree or any kind of string, and a lace ribbon. You'll also need pins, scissors, and your sewing machine loaded with matching thread. I'm going to pause here for a moment to say that I will leave information in the description box below if you would like to make a table runner specific to the size of your table. I wanted my table runner to have a little ruffle on the end. The piece of fabric I have here is 34 inches by 3.5 inches. The first thing you want to do is lay your fabric print or right side down. Then you want to take your string and cut it at least 6 inches longer than your piece of fabric. You're going to want that string to hang over both sides of your fabric. Take your fabric and your string to your machine. Lay your string in between the edge of the fabric and your seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so I'm going to make sure my stitches stay away from that 1/2 inch mark. Make sure your string is under the middle of your presser foot. And set your stitch to zigzag. Adjust your stitch to go over the string. You don't want to sew through the string. When you start sewing, take your time to stay inside the seam allowance and sewing over the string. When you get to the end, take your fabric out and cut your thread. If you look here, I almost didn't cut my string long enough, but I'm gonna make it work. Next, take out your pins and your actual table runner and lay it right or print side up. Here I'm fixing my mistake by pulling my string out slightly. Now going to the opposite side, I'm going to secure my string with a pin. Stick the pin into the fabric and wind the string around the pin a few times. Now go back to the other side. We're going to begin to gather the fabric. Slide the fabric along the string towards the end of the string that is secured. And just take your time sliding and gathering the fabric. Your goal is to gather the fabric to fit the width of the table runner, so stop and check every once in a while to gauge your progress. Here you can see I still have about 1 inch left to gather. Once I've gathered enough, I'm going to pin my ruffle to my table runner right sides together and secure my string to that pin. Then I'm going to the other end to pin my fabrics together. Now here is your time to finesse your ruffles and make sure that they are spaced just how you want them. And when they are to your liking, finish pinning your fabrics together. And this is what it should look like at this point. Now it's time to sew on your ruffle, but first we need to release the string from where it is secured. Do this by pulling out only the pin we used to secure it. I like to do one at the beginning of sewing the seam and the other at the end. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Make sure your machine is set to straight stitch. Line up your fabric to the proper seam allowance and move that loose string to the right. Sew up your seam to just about the end. When you get close to the end of the seam, you want to unwrap the string from the pin it is secured to, and make sure to move it to the right. Then finish off your seam. Now your ruffle is attached. Now you just want to pull that string out and set it aside to make the other ruffle. Isn't she lovely? Isn't she wonderful? Okay, enough. The last step for this side is to add the lace. This is optional as the table runner is nice as it is. I'm just showing you your different placement options. I'm going to sew mine right above the seam line. On the back, you want to make sure your seam allowance is pointing up so your seams will lay as flat as possible. Pin your lace into place, making sure the seam allowance is going up and away from the ruffle on the back. I've cut the lace with pinking shears. This gives a zigzag cut and is supposed to minimize fraying, although I don't mind a little fraying on this project. I'm showing you here again that the seam allowance is pointing up and away from the ruffle. Now we're going to attach the lace. You want to sew the lace along its outer edges. You'll need to do this in 2 separate passes. Remember to increase your stitch length a little bit to accommodate the additional fabric in the back. I apologize for being so out of frame here, but I'm showing you where the bottom edge of the lace is sewn and how we need to make a second pass to sew down the top edge. Put your runner back on your machine and sew down the other edge of the lace. When you're done, trim off any loose threads and repeat on the other end. Stay tuned to see how I set all my projects up. Don't forget to check out the playlist linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and leave me a comment below. If you'd like to see more, subscribe to my channel and select all notifications so you don't miss my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, love, inspire, create. See you next time.